Let me ask you something. You finish a story, a game, a show, whatever, and the heroes win. The big enemy is defeated. The war is over. Justice prevails. Roll credits. And then the sequel begins. And within the first few episodes, the first few hours, you realize everything you fought for has been corrupted. The institution that sent you to war is now the villain. The victory you had just earned has been weaponized by the wrong people. And the only path forward is to defect. You join up with an enemy group that might be shady, might be dangerous, but is the only force actually fighting the real enemy. This is the premise of Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam, which originally aired in Japan in 1985. And it is also pretty much beat for beat the premise of Mass Effect 2, which released in 2010. Now, I'm not going to claim that BioWare secretly adapted Tomino's seminal mecha anime. Similarities are almost certainly convergent. Two separate creative teams arriving at the same structural solution to the same narrative problem. But the fact they arrived at such similar places, through such similar means, across such different media and eras of time, says something genuinely interesting about storytelling. About sequels, and what audience need from a second chapter. So today, I want to do a deep dive into both of these worlds, side by side. I'm going to walk through the plot transitions, the faction dynamics, the protagonist arcs, and the thematic DNA that makes both of these sequels not just good follow-ups, but transformative ones that redefine what the original franchises are about, and, in my opinion, are better than the original source material. Fair warning, both are going to get spoiled. If you haven't watched Zeta or played Me Too, I'm going to ruin both of them, hopefully in a way that makes you want to experience them for yourself. So turn back now, or otherwise, let's get into it. Understand why these sequels hit so hard, you have to understand what the original set up. And more importantly, what they promised. Mobile Suit Gundam, or as I'm going to call it, Gundam 79, was a war story. It follows Amuro Ray. Uh, how do I say this? Polarizing teenager on a space colony who kind of just stumbles into Mr. Magoo style, the original Mobile Suit called the Gundam, that his dad built, and basically fights with the Earth Federation, which are the good guys, the Earth government, against the revolutionary colony of the Principality of Zeon. Amuro, I call Amuro controversial or whatever because, like, he just kind of is a whiny brat for a lot of the show. Yet at the same time, he's quite clearly the most competent mobile suit pilot in the entire universe at this point, or galaxy, however you want to quantify it. And it's just like I like Amuro, but I can understand why others wouldn't. Regardless, Zeon's whole point of this is they want independence for the space colonies. They want the space noids to be free of the Earthlings' control. Meanwhile, the Federation obviously wants to keep their colonies in control. You know, they want to keep them in the fold. Makes perfect sense. And in the middle of all of this is Amuro, our soldier, but he's not really. He's kind of like a child soldier, but he's not really a soldier. He acts like a child in a lot of instances where soldiers would kind of be more resolute because he's like a 14-year-old kid. And he's not really a hero. I mean, he does heroic things, but he's not really like a hero. He's not searching out there to be a hero. He's trying to survive and try to help the others around him survive, which I guess you could articulate as being a hero. But he's just kind of just a kid who's really good at fighting and gets very traumatized, as you see throughout the sequels and the rest of the UC timeline, about what all that means and what happens to him. If you have watched any Gundam, the most common sort of theme is anti-war, and that's no different in Gundam 79. Tomino kind of didn't really make the Federation just this unambiguously good force, or make Zeon unambiguously evil. I know that they talk about Hitler and they do the Zig Heil and they say Zig Zeon, which based, but like there's kind of some tragedy on both sides that's kind of exemplified by some of the other media such as Gundam the Origin and some of the sequel shows that just show you the trials and tribulations of war. But MSG 79 really sets this up. And there's, structurally, obviously you're supposed to root for the other Federation force. The other Federation is, our protagonists. They want to help the most people. Meanwhile, Zeons are like, let's drop a colony on Earth and wipe out half the planet. Pretty bad, but there's certain aspects and nuances about them that you can kind of understand why they are the way they are. Amuro clearly fights for the Federation. Zeon is the enemy and supported by the charismatic and one of the best characters in all of fiction, Char, however you want to say that last name. But ultimately, Amuro defeats Char, Zeon. War's over. Everyone lives happily ever after, except not really. Contrast this with Mass Effect 1. Shepard is a soldier fighting in the Systems Alliance military, the human faction of the galactic community. You're investigating a rogue Spectre, essentially a covert agent named Saren, who's working with a synthetic alien race called the Geth, and ultimately serving an ancient machine intelligence called Sovereign. The enemy is clear. Saren, the Geth, and behind them, the Reapers. Saren is great, and Shepard is very fun to play as, and the ability to kind of make decisions is great, but I mean, the good and the bad is kind of obvious. It's organic versus mechanicals. The Alliance are the good guys. The Citadel Council is mostly good, if not very bureaucratic and borderline incompetent. You're a hero with a badge and a mission. You win, Saren dies, Sovereign is destroyed. Pretty cut and dry. Pretty cut and dry for a third-person cover shooter. Both originals share this fundamental quality, though. Moral orientation. You know who you're fighting for and why. The enemy is defined. The institutions are legitimate, even if they're flawed. And the hero's relationship with those institutions is basically stable. Amuro's a soldier whether he likes it or not, and Shepard is a Spectre, doing his or her, I usually do male Shepard, so his job. The stability is what makes the sequel so powerful, because both Zeta Gundam and Mass Effect 2 destroy it entirely. Here's the central irony of the bar of both sequels. The villains are made from the victors. In Zeta Gundam, the war against Zeon is over. The Earth Federation won. But out of that victory grew a faction called the Titans, an elite anti-insurgency task force, originally formed to hunt down remnant Zeon forces. On paper, legitimate. In practice, though, they become something monstrous. The Titans use chemical weapons on civilian colonies, conduct illegal experiments, and operate with impunity because they wear the Federation's uniform and carry the Federation's authority. They are not a foreign enemy. They are what the winning side becomes when no one was watching. Mass Effect 2 has Cerberus. Enemy 1, Cerberus was a fringe human supremacist organization. You encounter them in some of the side missions, doing horrific experiments on colonists and soldiers. They were a villain faction, completely, full stop. And yet, ME2 opens with Shepard being killed and then resurrected by Cerberus. The Illusive man, Cerberus' leader, funded the Lazarus Project that brought Shepard back. He wants to use Shepard to investigate the disappearance of human colonies. People being taken by an alien force called the Collectors, who are themselves serving the Reapers. So Shepard wakes up working for the bad guys, not as a prisoner, not under duress, as a reluctant ally, given a ship and a crew and resources, all bearing the Cerberus logo. They even really recreate his ship from the first game, basically perfectly. The parallel isn't perfect. The Titans are a corruption of the Federation itself, while Cerberus has always been a separate faction, but the structural function is the same. In both cases, the sequel is saying, the war you fought in the first story is not the real war. The enemy you defeated was not the real enemy. The institution you trusted to hold things together after the victory, well, it either became the problem, or never had the answers to begin with. This is a deeply mature thing for a sequel to say. Most franchise follow-ups are just a bigger threat, and it escalates the scales. And there's nothing wrong with that. Ratchet & Clank is just like, what if we give you a bigger enemy over and over again? And then eventually when you get to the future games that kind of do this. But the original sequels are just like bigger enemy. And that's great. A lot of games and movies and shows and everything does this well and perfectly fine. Zeta and ME2 do something so much harder. They make you interrogate the meaning of what came before. Let's talk about what protagonists actually do in response to the situation, because this is where the structural parallel gets really interesting. In Zeta Gundam, Kamille Bidan, our new protagonist, is not Amuro. He doesn't inherit a clean legacy. He's much more angry, impulsive, and politically awakened almost immediately by witnessing Titan's brutality firsthand. He ends up joining the AEUG, the Anti-Earth Union Group, which is a resistance movement operating outside Federation law. They have sympathizers in the Federation, they have former Xeon members in their ranks, and they fight from stolen ships with full mobile suits. By any conventional measure, they are outlaws. And yet, they are clearly the protagonists. They are clearly the moral force of the story. Tomino never let you fully trust them. There are AEUG leaders who are cynical, or those whose motives are mixed, but the show consistently positions them as a legitimate resistance against an illegitimate power. ME2 does the same thing with Cerberus, just with more friction applied. The game constantly reminds you that Cerberus has done terrible things. Your squad mates from ME1 distrust them. Crew members on your new ship, the Normandy SR2, work for the Illusive man, not you. You have resources and support, but you're never quite certain you're not being used. The moral compromise of working with Cerberus is the texture of the whole game. It's not a plot point that gets resolved, it's a condition you've lived with for about 40 hours. Both stories are doing something very specific. They are making the protagonist's institutional position itself a source of drama. Not enough to fight dangerous enemies, the hero has to navigate where they stand, who they're accountable to, and what they're willing to do in service of a larger goal. That's a fundamentally different kind of storytelling than a clean hero versus villain dynamic. It's more like a moral complexity you find in prestige TV, and both of these stories were ahead of their time in deploying it within their genre of entertainment. Now let's talk about something I love, the heroes themselves, because sequels handle their protagonists in fascinatingly parallel ways, though through completely different techniques. Zeta Gundam makes a bold choice. Doesn't follow Amuro, it follows a new protagonist, Kamille Bidon. While Amuro exists in the background, he's older, somewhat broken, living under house arrest and under surveillance by the Titans. It's kind of a bold decision by Zeta. You spent 43 episodes with Amuro, and now you're following someone completely different? But the choice is thematically coherent. Amuro represents the first generation, the kids who fought the 1 Year War, who are now adults living in the aftermath. He carries the scars of the conflict. He has the mental capacity and abilities he's gained, but he's completely disillusioned by the war he just participated in. He's not the right lens for this new story, because the new story is about what victory produced. Kamille, untroubled by the 1 Year War, sees the Titans with fresh eyes. His outrage is unfiltered. He has slowly been boiled in a water of compromise and exhaustion, the way the older generation has. Mass Effect 2 can't make a new protagonist. You've already built and bonded around Shepard across the entire first game. But it finds a clever structural workaround. It kills him, or her. Shepard dies in the opening minutes, and you spend the game with someone who's technically Shepard. Same memories, same face, but who's been rebuilt by an organization they normally oppose. In a body that may or may not be fully his own or her own. Fighting a war that the institutions they once served don't even acknowledge is happening. The Shepard of ME2 is functionally a new protagonist, wearing the skin of the old one. They have been stripped of their rank, their alliance, their institutional legitimacy. They have to rebuild the trust with their old companions, and in every practical sense, they're starting over. Which is the same position Kamille is at the start of Beta, even though the mechanism is completely different. Both of these choices serve the same narrative purpose. They force the audience to re-examine what the heroism actually means in this new, more compromised landscape. You can't rely on the protagonist's institutional authority more. You have to find a different basis for trust. There is no looking at this from the old order. The world is completely shifted. The sides are different. The morality of the world is different. And now we have to delve into it with fresh eyes. I want to spend some time on supporting Parallel that I think is underrated. The figure who operates at the edge of the protagonist's fraction. Who has his own agenda. Who is brilliant and compelling, but not entirely trustworthy. In Zeta Gundam, that figure is Char as an oblate. Surprise! He survived. The mass antagonist from the original series. He has now reinvented himself as Quattro Bagina, an AEUG officer and reluctant mentor to Kamille. Char's motivations in Zeta are genuinely ambiguous. He believes in the AEUG's cause broadly. He also has his personal vendetta against the Zabi family. Arguably drives more his behavior than any ideology. I mean, I don't know if I would even say arguably, like, So Char's whole purpose is killing the zombies for what happened to his family, and he will follow that to any end. But he still decides to mentor Kamille, but never really opens up about who Char actually is. He continues to operate in the AEUG, but never fully commits to it. He's a man with resources, a cause, and an agenda you can never quite read, who is nonetheless essential to the protagonist's survival and development. Counteracting, the Illusive Man is, I wouldn't say the exact same character, but they're pretty similar. He funds Shepard's mission, he provides intelligence, support, and direction. He claims to want what Shepard wants, stopping the Collectors, protecting humanity. But his methods are wrong. His organization is wrong. And there's always a sense that he's using Shepard for something beyond what he's told them. The dramatic irony of ME2 is that you work for him for the entire game, hell more than you probably should, and in the final mission, make the choice to deny him the Reaper technology he's been angry for all along, or give it to him. Both characters function as a kind of dark mirror to the idealism of our protagonist. They represent the more pragmatic, amoral version of the fight, the version that's willing to do terrible things in service of a legitimate goal. And the hero's relationship with them is the crucible in which the story's moral questions are actually resolved. One of the things both sequels do brilliantly is maintain a dual-layered threat structure. In Zeta Gundam, the primary antagonists are the Titans, a human organization, political, tangible, defeatable in principle, but hovering behind them, growing more present as the series progresses. They're a more existential threat, the escalating horror of what new types are becoming, the manipulation of psychomu systems, the emergence of figures like Paptimus Sirocco, who represents a different and more frightening version of humanity's future. The war against the Titans is in the foreground. The question of what humanity is evolving to is in the background. ME2 has the Collectors in the foreground and the Reapers in the background. You fight the Collectors. You stop their human harvesting operation at the Collector base. But the whole time the Reapers are out there. And every mission makes their eventual arrival feel more inevitable. The suicide mission is generally about the Collectors. But the emotional weight of the game is whether you and your crewmates are prepared for what's coming after. The structure. The immediate political enemy in the foreground. The vast existential threat in the background. Creates a very specific kind of dread that both works deploy masterfully. You're fighting a war, but you're also watching the clock tick down on a much bigger one. And the tragedy in both cases is that the people who should be dealing with the big threat are too busy fighting each other over the small one. That's the Titans and the Federation wasting each other's strength, while the remnants of the new type experiments fester and grow. That's the Alliance and the Council, refusing to acknowledge the Reaper threat, while Shepard scrambles to close the Collector problem, with one hand behind their back. It's a structural critique of institutions baked into the plot itself. I want to talk about the tone because I think this is unappreciated as the thing that most unifies these two works. The original Gundam is grim, but it's kind of tragic grandeur to it. Characters die heroically. There's mourning and meaning. The war ends and there's space for the audience to feel that something was achieved. Somehow Zeta Gundam is harsher. The deaths are uglier. The victories feel pyrrhic, and almost immediately. Characters you've invested in are taken away. Not in climactic moments, but in a sudden, almost random way. Tomino reportedly wanted to kill everyone by the end. While he didn't quite get there, the final episodes are genuinely harrowing. The kind of ending that refused to give the audience the emotional resolution they're expecting. ME2, meanwhile, in my opinion, is the best game of the trilogy precisely because it refuses easy resolution. The whole game is preparation for a mission you're told you probably won't survive. The suicide mission is designed to make you feel the weight of every choice you've made. Which companions do you develop loyalty missions for? Which upgrades do you neglect? Who do you trust with that task? And people die. Not abstract NPCs. Your crew. Tali. Morden. Garrus. The people you spent 40 hours with. Unless you're like me and did everything anyway because you're a boss. Both works share the same conviction that in a morally compromised war, followed by morally compromised institutions, the cost of heroism isn't glory, it's loss. Collective, cumulative, grinding, particularly meaningless loss. And the heroism is continuing anyway, not because you believe in the institutions you're fighting other, because the alternative, letting the Titans win, letting the Collector succeed, is worse. That's a very specific moral stance. It's not nihilism, it's not really cynicism. It's something harder. A tragic realism that says the fight is worth even having when the fight is ugly, and the cause is compromised, and you can't fully trust the people on your side. So why does this narrative structure? Hero defects from the corrupt institution, joins a morally gray resistance, fights immediate enemy while the larger let rooms. Why does it work so well in both cases? I think it comes down to what the sequels owe their audiences. A sequel can do a few things. It can do more of the same. Bigger stakes, same dynamic, same escalation. It can go sideways, different characters, adjacent story, world building expansion. Or it can interrogate the original. Take the assumptions of the first story and ask whether they are actually true. Zeta Gundam and ME2 are both interrogations. They look at the victories of the predecessors and ask, okay, but what did that win actually mean? Who benefited? What grew in the space that the conflict created? And what does it mean to be a hero when the side you were fighting for is now doing the thing you fought against? That's not comfortable. It asks the audience to revisit their investment in the original, to hold the hero's legacy more lightly, to distrust institutions rather than finding comfort in them. Both works are, in a sense, genuinely political, but not in that partisan way. Not in the way where it's like everything is political. You know, like, um, for example, like Kojima's works are inherently political just because Kojima talks about politics, because that's kind of the story they're in, because it's an espionage game, or that like it deals with monarchy or democracy in just a general set of the setting and the players within it. I mean, in more of a mature way. It focuses on who's interested in the power, and who has and what they do with it, and who suffers from it. Not a great, big objection to power of any structure, but just kind of being like, look back at what we're dealing with. Is this the right structure to deal with? Or is there something else that, while flawed, is less flawed in the right ways to make it so it's more worth benefiting? The reason both these sequels are considered the best entries in the respective franchises, at least by me and by, I would say, a plurality of people who have seen them, are they genuinely are, and they're willing to do these sorts of things I've described in this video. They don't give audiences what they expected. They give audiences something more honest. I started this video because I watched Zeta Gundam after playing Mass Effect for the first time, and the pair almost hit me in a way I was like, I didn't really think about that the first time I watched Zeta years before I played Mass Effect, but like, dang, there's some similarities here, and it wasn't until I rewatched it that those things came to me at the surface. The more I sat with both of them, the more I've convinced they're solving the same problem in the same way, and the solution is so good, so durable, that it arrived independently in two completely different creative traditions, 40 odd years apart. If you've only seen Gundam, watch Zeta. If you've only played ME1, somehow play 2. If you've done both, I hope this gave you a new framework for why both of them feel so much heavier and more meaningful than their first chapters. The war you thought you were fighting is never the real war. People you thought were the heroes aren't the ones wearing the uniform. And sometimes the only people actually doing the right thing are the ones who got fed up and defected. It's not a cynical message. I think it's actually a hopeful one. Thank you for watching.